At 2:11 a.m., Ethan sat in front of his laptop, watching an AI generate an entire business in less than 60 seconds. A website, marketing copy, product images, even customer support, all automated. 5 years earlier, a team of people would have built that company over months. Now one person and a machine could do it overnight, and that was the moment something terrifying clicked in his mind. What happens when intelligence becomes unlimited, but ownership does not? Because if AI eventually allows everyone to create anything instantly, then the people who already own assets may own the future itself, and everyone else may never catch up again. There is a theory spreading quietly through finance and technology circles that humanity may have entered the final phase of economic mobility before AI permanently changes how wealth is created, not because robots will destroy the world, but because they may remove the very inefficiencies ordinary people once used to climb upward. And in this documentary, we are going to explore what happens when artificial intelligence collides with debt, money, inflation ownership, and the future of capitalism itself. The theory is simple. You may have roughly 5 to 10 years left to position yourself before AI fundamentally changes the economy forever. Right now, people can still move upward financially. You can learn a skill, build a business, find inefficiencies, create content, start a company. But AI compresses those inefficiencies rapidly. When everyone can instantly generate code designs, videos, marketing analysis, and automation, the competitive edge narrows dramatically, and eventually value may shift away from labor entirely toward ownership. Ownership of stocks, real estate, intellectual property, networks, energy, data, digital systems. This is why some investors believe we are entering the most important wealth transition of modern history. Elon Musk has repeatedly described two possible AI outcomes. The first is optimistic, a world where AI and robotics create so much abundance that human labor becomes optional. Robots handle production, AI handles services, and governments distribute some form of universal income to maintain stability. In this future, society becomes materially abundant. But the second outcome is darker. Instead of abundance creating equality, it creates concentration. The owners of AI systems become exponentially wealthier, while everyone dependent on wages slowly loses bargaining power. A K-shaped economy emerges. One side rises aggressively upward, the other stagnates permanently beneath it, and AI becomes the force that freezes the divide in place. Look around the modern economy. Stocks hit record highs. Gold hits record highs. Real estate hits record highs. Government debt, corporate debt, and consumer debt also hit record highs simultaneously. At first, this feels irrational, but beneath it is a hidden reality. People are desperately trying to escape currency dilution by owning assets, because modern money constantly expands. After 2020 alone, trillions of new dollars entered the global system through stimulus, quantitative easing, and debt expansion. And when money supply expands faster than productivity, asset prices inflate. This is why people holding assets often feel richer, while savers quietly fall behind. Not because assets became magically valuable, but because currency itself lost purchasing power relative to scarce things. Modern economies operate on a debt-based monetary system. Governments borrow money. Central banks inject liquidity. Interest rates are lowered to encourage spending and growth. This philosophy comes from Keynesian economics, the idea that economies must constantly be stimulated to avoid collapse. And for decades, this system worked well enough to sustain growth. But there is a side effect. The more money enters the system, the more difficult it becomes for ordinary savings to maintain value over time, which forces people into assets. Stocks, housing, commodities, anything scarce enough to resist dilution. And slowly, society transforms into two groups: those who own appreciating assets and those who depend entirely on wages. A K-shaped economy describes a society splitting into two directions. The upper half owns productive assets and benefits from inflation. The lower half relies mostly on labor income, while living costs rise faster than wages. This divide already exists today. The wealthiest households control most stock ownership. Most real estate appreciation benefits existing owners. And asset inflation compounds wealth upward over time. But until now, people could still move between economic classes. Because inefficiencies existed. People could create businesses, solve problems, and build leverage. AI may reduce that mobility dramatically. Because when intelligence becomes widely accessible, advantage shifts toward whoever already owns the platform's infrastructure and capital. Artificial intelligence does not simply automate jobs. It automates leverage. One person can now produce the output of entire teams. Businesses scale faster. Content becomes infinite. Software creation accelerates. Decision-making speeds up. And eventually, the gap between idea and execution collapses almost entirely. That sounds empowering. But there is a hidden consequence. When creation becomes easy, ownership becomes everything. Because if millions of people can produce similar outputs instantly, then scarcity no longer exists in labor. Scarcity exists in assets, attention, distribution, infrastructure, energy, and intellectual property. This is why some economists believe AI may create the final transition from a labor economy into an ownership economy. In the center of this debate are two opposing views of money itself. Keynesian economics argues governments must actively manage economies through spending stimulus and intervention. The system prioritizes stability, even if debt expands indefinitely. Austrian economics believes the opposite. It argues economies should naturally correct themselves even through recessions, and money should remain scarce, stable, and resistant to manipulation. One philosophy believes inflation encourages growth. The other believes inflation quietly destroys purchasing power and distorts truth. And this philosophical divide shapes how people prepare for the future. Because your understanding of money determines what you choose to own. If AI eventually handles most productive labor, then ownership may become the defining factor of survival. Ownership of productive businesses, digital platforms, energy systems, data networks, intellectual property, and financial assets. In previous generations, upward mobility often came from effort alone. In the future, mobility may increasingly come from access to ownership structures before they become unreachable. This is why investors are aggressively accumulating assets today. Not because they fully understand the future, but because they understand the direction of incentives. And they fear being left outside the system once the divide hardens permanently. This is where Bitcoin enters the conversation. Supporters view Bitcoin as one of the few truly scarce digital assets in existence. Unlike traditional currencies, its supply cannot be endlessly expanded, and that scarcity makes some investors view it as a form of hard money, a system outside government-controlled monetary expansion. To Austrian economists, this matters deeply, because they believe technology should naturally make life cheaper over time. If productivity increases, prices should fall. But inflationary systems often prevent consumers from fully experiencing that deflation. Bitcoin supporters argue scarce money restores that relationship. Not because Bitcoin guarantees wealth, but because it resists dilution in a world increasingly dependent on endless monetary expansion. The real question is not whether AI will destroy humanity. It is whether economic mobility survives automation. Are we entering the final era where ordinary people can still build ownership before systems become fully optimized? Or will AI create a world of abundance where ownership no longer matters? Nobody truly knows. But history suggests one thing clearly. Whenever technology massively increases productivity, wealth usually concentrates first before society adapts later. And during that transition, ownership matters more than ever. Which means the next decade may become one of the most important financial positioning periods of modern history. For decades, people believed wealth came primarily from labor. But the AI era may shift the world towards something entirely different. A system where intelligence becomes abundant, but ownership remains scarce. And if that future arrives, the people who own productive assets may experience extraordinary leverage while everyone else struggles to keep pace. Not because they worked harder, but because they owned part of the machine before the machine became everything. Maybe this future never fully happens. Maybe society adapts beautifully. Or maybe we are watching the early stages of the largest economic transition since the Industrial Revolution. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The future may belong less to the people who work the hardest, and more to the people who understand what is worth owning before everyone else does.